Chapter 14. Lindsay. Help me. Help me. Hear it? It's the drowned girl, Mayanne whispered, jumping to her feet. I hopped up too. A cold chill swept down my back. The bedsheet got tangled around one leg, and I nearly fell. Help. A low moan. So faint, so incredibly faint. She's out in the hall, Mayanne whispered. I told you, she haunts the club. You hear it too, don't you? I nodded, still groggy from sleep, still feeling the fear of my nightmare. I hear it too, Mayanne, I whispered. You're not imagining it. But I don't believe in ghosts. That's what I told myself as I followed Mayanne across the bare floor to the door. Help me. Please help. I don't believe in you, I silently told the ghost. So why are you standing outside my bedroom door? My heart was pounding as we stepped up to the door and pressed our ears against it. Silence. Then another low moan. Such a mournful sound. Then a dry whisper, dry as death. Mayanne gripped the door handle. I took a step back. Help. Help. Right outside. So close. So close. With a sudden motion, Mayanne turned the knob and yanked the door open, and we both stared out at the moaning ghost. Chapter 15. Lindsay. Help me, please? I goggled, totally stunned. Mayanne's face registered surprise at first. Then her features knotted in anger. Cassie, she shrieked, you're not funny? Cassie started to laugh. She fell against Pug, who grabbed her around the waist, grinning sheepishly at us. The look on your faces, Cassie managed to choke out through her laughter. Tears ran down her cheeks. You're not funny, Mayanne repeated through clenched teeth. She was gripping the doorknob so hard, her hand must have hurt. It was Cassie's idea, Pug said, still holding on to her. Cassie pushed her blonde hair away from her face. You believed it, didn't you? She accused Mayanne. You really believed it was a ghost. Mayanne didn't reply. She just glared back at Cassie in fury. My heart finally stopped racing. I started to laugh. I had to admit that Cassie made a pretty convincing ghost. Mayanne was so serious about the club being haunted, she even had me believing it. It was a relief that it was just Cassie, up to another one of her practical jokes. You should be an actress, Cassie, I told her. She took a short bow. Then she let out another ghostly moan. Pug and I applauded. I turned to Mayanne, expecting her to lighten up, to join in the joke, or at least admit that Cassie had fooled her. But to my surprise, Mayanne uttered a loud sob. You'll be sorry, she screamed at Cassie, with such anger that Cassie and Pug both stopped grinning and stared stonily at Mayanne. Then Mayanne slammed the door shut, so hard that all the little mice on her dresser jumped. Mayanne, it was just a joke, I said, reaching for her shoulder, trying to calm her. But Mayanne pulled away from me. Cassie will be sorry, she murmured bitterly. She'll be sorry, you'll see. I woke up early the next morning and gazed out the window of our room. The sun was bright red, climbing a clear sky. The air was already hot. The corner of the pool visible from the window sparkled invitingly. Our first real summer day. I knew the club would be crowded. I showered and dressed, pulling a long-sleeved white t-shirt over my navy blue bathing suit, and hurried to breakfast. By the time I got to the dining room, Cassie had already told everyone about the joke she had played. Everyone made haunting ghost wails as I entered the room. I laughed, but I knew Mayanne wouldn't find it amusing. I had to leave before Mayanne came to breakfast. Pug and I had the first shift at the big pool. I splashed on plenty of sunblock before climbing the platform. The sun was already strong. I kept my t-shirt on. My sunburned shoulders were too tender. The pool was really crowded by 10:30. 3 women were doing serious laps in a roped-off area. A large group of teenagers, locals who all seemed to be friends, were dunking one another, splashing and acting pretty rowdy down at the deep end. Gazing across the pool, I had to shield my eyes from the sun even though I was wearing sunglasses. Pug was already surrounded by a group of teenage girls. He was really coming on to them, teasing them, acting like a big shot, really eating up the attention. He's a good-looking guy, I thought, watching the girls clamor around him, but he isn't that good-looking. I blew my whistle at a boy in huge baggy swim trunks who was trying to shove a smaller boy into the pool. Then my eye caught Cassie, on duty at the kiddie pool just beyond the deep end of the big pool. Cassie was standing at the edge of the round pool, hands at her waist. She was frowning, staring angrily at Pug. I guess she wasn't happy about Pug's female fan club. My first shift went smoothly. It felt good to be soaking up the sun, watching a noisy, crowded pool. I love the smell of swimming pools, that sweet, tart chlorine smell. I think it's my favorite aroma. Summer is finally here, I thought happily. Mayanne appeared a little before 11. She was giving a life-saving class every morning in the shallow end. To my surprise, she waved and seemed really cheerful. I watched her walk to the diving board and dive in. Mayanne was a really graceful diver. Her long legs were straight and she hardly made a splash. Arnie replaced me a few minutes after 11. I climbed down from the platform, eager to go inside and cool off. A glass of cold water sounded like a good idea. I had gone only a few steps, the concrete hot under my bare feet, when a voice stopped me. "Look at this. Do you believe this?" I felt a warm hand on my shoulder. I turned to see Spencer, holding his palm up to my face. "Huh? What's wrong with your hand?" I asked, confused. "No, look," he insisted. I saw a quarter in his palm. "You're showing me a quarter?" He nodded. His dark eyes sparkled in the sunlight. He adjusted his short ponytail with a toss of his head. "Know what it is?" he asked. "Yeah, I know what a quarter is," I told him. "It's a tip," he said, sneering. He lowered his hand. "Some rich woman pressed it into my hand." I laughed. "She gave you a tip?" He frowned. I helped her with her lounge chair. The back was stuck, so I fixed it for her. I started to walk away, and she pushed a quarter into my hand. "Your lucky day," I said dryly. "Know what she said to me?" Spencer demanded. "Know what she said?" A grin slowly spread over his face. She said, "Put it in your college fund." We both laughed. "Very generous," I said. "Maybe if you help her with her chair tomorrow, she'll give you another quarter." His smile faded. He tossed a quarter into a trash basket. "Hey!" I cried, reaching out, too late to stop him. "That's money. I think it's against the law to throw it away." "We're talking big-time crime here," he muttered. I stared back at him, trying to remember last summer, trying to remember something about him. "Spencer," I started. "Last summer, you and I—" He glanced at the pool clock. "Uh-oh, I'm late. Got to run. Bye, Lindsay." "But, Spencer—" Too late. He was jogging to the deep end of the pool. I stood there, watching him. I knew Spencer. I definitely knew him. And he knew me. Then why didn't I remember anything about him? When he first entered the room on that stormy day, he had seemed so surprised to see me, but then he had seemed glad. Had there been something between Spencer and me last summer? Did he and I have a short romance or something? I had the feeling we did, but I couldn't dredge the memory up. I couldn't dredge up any memory about him. Late that night, I awoke and sat up in my narrow bed, drenched in hot sweat. My nightshirt clung to my back. The clock radio read 2:45. Middle of the night. My head ached. It was so hot, so sticky and hot. I felt as if I were drowning in hot sweat. I gazed across the room. Pale gray light filtered through the window onto Mayanne's bed. Mayanne's empty bed. Where was she? I climbed unsteadily to my feet. I made my way to the open window. The air from outside felt as hot as the air inside the room. I need a swim, I decided. To cool off, a quick dip. I changed into the swimsuit I had worn that morning. Then, silently, I tiptoed into the hall. I checked both ways. No one in sight. Of course no one is in sight, I scolded myself. It's 2:00 in the morning. Walking quickly, still bathed in sweat, I made my way out to the pool. The water glistened under the white floodlights. The blue tiles shimmered. The sky stretched overhead, dotted with thousands of tiny blinking stars. The pavement was still warm under my bare feet. The water looked so cool, so inviting. I stepped to the edge of the shallow end and stared down the length of the pool. Someone had left a white styrofoam boogie board in the pool. It bobbed near the rope that sectioned off the lap area, next to a blue object floating near where the deep water began. A floating blue object. A floating girl. I gasped as I ran along the side of the pool, and she came into clear focus. A girl in a blue bikini, floating face down, bobbing with the water, her blonde hair floating on top of the water. Her skin so white, so unearthly white under the artificial light. No, it had to be my imagination, another hallucination. I blinked, then blinked again. I shut my eyes, trying to force her away. But when I opened them, she still floated in front of me. She was real, a real girl, floating so lifelessly. No! I plunged into the water. I didn't even take a breath. I dove in, felt the cold water over me. I came up sputtering, choking. 3 long strokes, that's all it took to get to the girl. 3 long strokes, and I reached her. Still coughing, I grabbed her blonde hair, tugged her up, pulled her face out of the water. So heavy. Her head was so heavy. I stared at it, stared at her face, stared at it, and didn't believe it. Chapter 16. Lindsay. Holding her up by the hair, I stared into the dead girl's face, stared into my face, Lindsay's face, my own face. You can't be Lindsay, I choked out. I held her up so that her face, my face, was practically touching mine. You can't be Lindsay, I told the dead girl, because I am Lindsay. Water rolled down her pale forehead. Her purple, swollen lips opened slowly, and water rolled out and down her chin. Her eyes, lifeless green eyes, stared back at me blankly. More water poured out from between the swollen lips. I heard a choking sound, then the sound of air brushing past the dead lips. The green eyes rolled up in her head, leaving only white showing. Another brush of air as more water rolled down her chin, and then a wet whisper. The purple lips shuddered and moved, and words dribbled out in a wet whisper. I'm Lindsay, the dead girl murmured, her solid white eyes glaring at me, so bright under the floodlights. No, I cried, no! And as I held her hair, held up her heavy, water-soaked head, her pale skin began to darken. Her skin darkened to green, and then it began to droop. The eyes sank back into the green skin, until I was staring at empty sockets. Green as seaweed, her skin sagged. It oozed down toward the water. A dull moan escaped the swollen lips. A clump of skin plopped into the water, then another. I still gripped the blonde hair, gripped it tightly, held it up as I stared at the disintegrating face. In seconds the green skin had all slipped off, and I was left holding a handful of hair, staring in horror at a watery skull. Chapter 17. Lindsay. Frozen in horror, I gaped into the deep black eye sockets of the skull. With a choked gasp, I finally let go of the hair. As the dead girl sank into the water, she began to fade. The water swirled up, splashed against my face, into my eyes, and when I opened my eyes, the girl was gone, and I was sitting up in bed, drenched in sweat. The curtains fluttered out from the bedroom window in a soft, warm breeze. I shuddered and squinted into the gray light. I pulled the bedsheet up to my chin, even though I was hot and sticky. I sat still and waited for the trembling to stop. It had been a dream, a truly gross dream. The girl in the pool, the girl with my face, just a nightmare. Her rotting, wet face lingered in my mind. I shut my eyes, but she didn't go away. I blinked several times, struggling to force away my nightmare, struggling to focus my eyes in the darkness. Lindsay? A whispered voice. In my dream? Someone calling to me from my nightmare? Across the dark room, the curtain snapped noisily, startling me. Lindsay? The voice whispered again. Not in my dream, I realized. I was wide awake now. I gazed across the room at Mayan's bed, still empty. Where was she? Where was Mayan in the middle of the night? I pushed a lock of damp hair off my forehead. I suddenly thought of my air conditioner at home, the little air conditioner tucked into the window on the left. I felt a pang of homesickness. Lindsay, come here. The voice was calling me. Who was it? Where? Right outside the door. Mayan? I called out to her for some reason. Was it Mayan calling to me? Was Mayan locked out of the room somehow? No, I hadn't locked the door. Mayan? I repeated her name, then listened to the silence. Lindsay, come out. Lindsay. I lowered my feet to the floor. I stood up and yawned. Who was calling me? The curtains tossed violently in a sudden gust. I shivered despite the heat. I pulled a cotton robe over my nightshirt and fumbled in the dark until I managed to slip my feet into a pair of rubber flip-flops. Lindsay, a hoarse whisper, just loud enough for me to hear through the door. I'm coming, I called, then yawned again, still half asleep. The nightmare lingered in my mind. I saw my dead, water-bloated face again. I opened the door. No one in the hall. Lindsay, come here, the voice called me from around the corner. I stepped into the hall, pulling my robe around me, tying the belt. I felt so sleepy. Was I really doing this? Was I really out in the hall at 3 in the morning, following a whispered voice? I made my way around the corner. I heard a door creak, far down the hall. But I didn't see anyone. I stopped to listen. Had the whispering stopped? Had the voice disappeared? Lindsay, this way. I began breathing hard. I suddenly realized that my hands were cold. What is going on here? I wondered. Mayanne, is that you? I asked. My voice came out so soft I could barely hear it. This way, came the whispered reply. I stood in front of the dining room doors. The voice had summoned me to the dining room. I pushed the door open. Who's here? I managed to choke out. No reply. The room was hot, stifling hot. Orange light flickered against the wall. It took me a while to realize that a fire was blazing in the fireplace. A fire at 3 in the morning? Is anybody in here? I cried, my voice shrill and tight. I took a few steps into the room, my eyes on the fire, on the brilliant orange flames. Oh, I uttered a low moan when I saw Cassie. She was lying face down in front of the fire, shadows dancing over her. I saw her sandals first. Then I recognized her baggy green shorts, the shorts she had worn at dinner. Then I saw the fireplace poker lying beside her on the floor. Cassie? I guessed. Why was she lying like that? So close to the fire. So close. Too close. I let out a wild shriek when I saw the flames leap over her head. Her head was in the fire. Cassie? No! With a loud sob, I grabbed her feet. I pulled, and pulled with all my might. The body started to slide. I pulled harder, pulled her away, pulled her from the leaping, tossing flames. I was still holding on to both her ankles when I saw that her hair, her face, they were all burned away. All burned away. Part 2. The Old Ghost. Chapter 18. Danny. Why was Lindsay in the dining room at 3 in the morning? That question kept repeating in my mind as I watched the police officers do their work. It wasn't my only question. I also wondered why Cassie had been in the dining room, why she had built such a big fire, why someone had murdered her. Murder. Had someone broken into the guest house? A burglar, maybe? Had Cassie surprised the burglar and gotten herself killed? The police hadn't been able to find any sign of a break-in. No broken windows. The doors to the outside were all locked. Do you think someone in this room killed Cassie? I whispered to Pete. He and I were standing by the window, watching the police, alert in case they had more questions for us. Pete shook his head. His eyes were red and watery. His face was pale, and he looked exhausted. No, that's impossible, he murmured, but I caught the uncertainty in his eyes. 2 officers continued to examine Cassie's body. Another officer was studying the brass fireplace poker. Another officer, a young woman, was staring thoughtfully into the fireplace. They had been in the dining room for nearly an hour. The fire had burned down. Purple embers glowed like a dark carpet below the grate. I glanced over at the other lifeguards. They were huddled around a table, their faces pale, their eyes red-rimmed and tired, their expressions solemn, frightened. Deirdre had her hands over her face. Her shoulders trembled. I realized she was crying. Pug leaned over her, trying to comfort her. Spencer's dark hair had fallen over his eyes. He stared down at the table as if in a trance. Arnie had his arms crossed tightly in front of him. His chair was tilted back against the wall. His eyes were closed. Lindsay and Mayanne sat close together at the far end, away from the others. Their faces were pinched, their mouths set in tight lines. Mayanne's auburn hair, usually neat and in place, was wild. Lindsay nervously tightened and untightened the belt on her robe. Her chin quivered, but she wasn't crying. Pete sighed as 2 grim-faced officers finally covered Cassie's body with a long sheet of black plastic. Her head, he muttered to me, swallowing hard. He turned away without finishing his sentence. The officers had already questioned everyone briefly. Now one of them turned from the fire and made her way to the table, her eyes on Lindsay. Mayanne scooted over. The woman sat down between Lindsay and Mayanne. I'm Officer Malone, she said softly. She had large brown eyes and a round face, topped with short black hair. Straight bangs crossed her forehead. She pulled a small notepad and a ballpoint pen from her blue shirt pocket. Tell me again how you happened to come to the dining room, she asked Lindsay, as I moved closer to listen. Lindsay cleared her throat. Her voice cracked as she started to reply. She cleared her throat once more. I heard a voice. It called me, Lindsay murmured. Officer Malone narrowed her brown eyes at Lindsay. A voice? Lindsay nodded. Her chin was quivering. She looked really frightened. You say you heard a voice. What kind of voice? Officer Malone asked, scribbling something on her pad. A man's voice? A woman's? A voice you recognized? Lindsay hesitated. Just a voice, she replied. It was more of a whisper, actually. I couldn't tell who it was. It just kept whispering my name, telling me to follow it. Officer Malone frowned. She stared hard at Lindsay, studying her face. You realize this sounds very strange, don't you? Lindsay nodded. She lowered her eyes. Are you saying you were sleepwalking? The woman asked. Were you dreaming the voice? No, Lindsay replied sharply. It was real. I heard it. It woke me up. It's true. She let out a short sob. I know you don't believe me, but... I didn't say that, Officer Malone replied gently. She raised a hand, motioning for Lindsay to calm down. I just think it's weird. Do you take medication of any kind? Huh? Lindsay gaped at her. No. Have you been drinking tonight? Beer or anything? No. What is your home address? The officer asked, writing in her pad. Across the room at the fireplace, I saw an officer down on his knees, poking through the embers with a gloved hand. Lindsay hesitated. I live at 212 Fear Street, she answered finally. It's in Shadyside, about 40 miles south of here. I know, Officer Malone replied. Officer Kurtz over there is from Shadyside. She pointed to the man poking through the fire. We'll have to talk more about this voice you heard, Lindsay, Officer Malone said. She patted Lindsay on the arm. But we don't have to talk now. You've been through a horrible shock. Lindsay nodded her head. Tears finally started to run down her cheeks. It's late, but I need to ask a few more questions, Officer Malone said, climbing to her feet to address the others. Pete and I moved even closer to the table. Arnie's chair tilted back a little too far. He nearly toppled over backward, but caught himself and managed to regain his balance. Spencer moved behind Lindsay and placed his hands on her trembling shoulders. He bent down and whispered something to her. I couldn't hear what he said. I felt a slight pang of jealousy. I realized that I wanted to be the one to comfort Lindsay. I found myself wondering whether Lindsay liked Spencer better than she liked me. Officer Malone scribbled something in her pad. Then she flipped the page and wrote some more. When she finished writing, she raised her dark eyes to Pug. You went out with Cassie tonight? Pug's cheeks darkened from pink to red. Yeah, we drove to town after dinner, he replied. He was nervously twirling a class ring on his finger. We were going to go to a movie, but we ended up just cruising around. What time did you get back? Officer Malone asked. Early, Pug told her. He raised his hand. I don't wear a watch, see, but it was early. And when did you get back here? The woman asked. We stayed out by the pool a little while, Pug said, twirling the ring. Then we went to our rooms. Did you see Cassie go to her room? Officer Malone demanded. Pug nodded. Yeah, it's right down the hall from mine. I saw her go in. I'm her roommate, Deidre broke in. Her face was puny and tear-stained. I was in bed, but I heard her come in. It was about 11:30. Did you hear Cassie leave the room later? Officer Malone asked. Deidre twisted her face into a thoughtful frown. No, I didn't, she replied. I'm a very sound sleeper. Officer Malone wrote something, then snapped the pad shut. She glanced at her watch. It's very late, she said. I'm going to let you all go back to bed while we continue our work. I glanced out the window and saw 2 officers examining the pool, leaning over the water, their faces bright from the light shining up from the pool. The club will have to be closed tomorrow, Officer Malone told Pete. Our investigation could take all day. We'll need to have the area untouched. Pete started to protest, but stopped himself. I'll have to call the director, he murmured. Has anyone called the girl's parents? Officer Kurtz asked from the fireplace. The room fell silent. I glanced down at the plastic covering over the body. I couldn't believe it was Cassie under there. The lifeguard started to make their way out. Deidre was crying. Spencer had an arm around Lindsay's shoulders. I stayed to help Pete, but he motioned for me to go to my room. I'll need your help tomorrow, he called. Out in the hall, Mayanne turned to me. Her dark eyes lit up excitedly. This happens every summer, she murmured. What? I wasn't sure I'd heard her. The police should know, Mayanne said. Someone dies here every summer? Up ahead, Lindsay gasped when Mayanne said that. I stared at Mayanne, startled by her expression. She had the strangest smile on her face, a gloating smile. Why is she so happy, I wondered. Why? Chapter 19. Mouse. Hi, Terry. It's me, Mouse. I've been dying to call you, Terry, but it's been crazy here. Police crawling all over the place, poking into every corner. I guess you know why. That's right, Terry. Mouse did it. I killed one, Terry. It wasn't that hard. She didn't know what hit her. I did it for you, Terry. I remember how the lifeguards all laughed at you. I remember the bad news jokes they pulled. They pulled them on me too, remember? Well, now who's getting the bad news? That's right, no one suspects me. Who would suspect innocent-looking Mouse? No one. But I've got to pick up the pace. I've got to get another one. And then another one. I promised you, Terry, and I keep my promises. I've got to run. I'll call you after I do the next one, Terry. I know you can't call me. Chapter 20. Lindsay. The day after the police left was sunny and hot. It felt more like August than late June, and the pool was crowded and noisy. Back to normal, I thought, gazing down from my high perch on the lifeguard platform. At least, some of us were back to normal. Pug was on the platform across from me, flirting with a group of giggling girls. One of them, a good-looking girl in a white bikini, stole his whistle, grabbed it right out of his hand and ran off with it. The other girls laughed. A few minutes later, when his break came, I saw Pug disappearing toward the tennis courts, his arm around another girl, this one in a red bikini. Back to normal, I sighed. Wish I could get back to normal. I concentrated on the swimmers in the pool. A group of kids were having a splashing war in a shallow end. Water splashed up onto my feet. I blew the whistle. Cool it, guys, I called to them. The splashing continued, only less violently. I congratulated myself. I had gone nearly 5 minutes without picturing Cassie sprawled on the dining room floor, her head in the fireplace. 5 minutes was a long time. The day before, the long, dreary day when the club was closed, I had pictured Cassie every time I closed my eyes. I'd kept to myself most of the day. Spencer asked if I wanted to take a walk or something, but I told him no. Danny was really considerate too. He kept checking to see if I was okay, if I wanted to talk. But I didn't want to talk. I didn't want to think either, but I couldn't help it. I kept picturing Cassie, and I kept hearing the whispered voice, calling me from my room, calling me to the dining room. I knew that Officer Malone didn't believe me about the voice. I saw the doubt in her face, the way she narrowed her eyes, as if challenging me to change the story. I didn't blame her. Who would believe such a weird story? The only problem was, it was true. Cassie's murder was so horrifying. It took up so much of my thoughts that I had little time to think about anything else. I suddenly found myself thinking about my parents. To my shock, I realized that I hadn't talked to them since I'd first arrived at the club. Almost a week and not a word from them. Why hadn't they called to make sure I had arrived? And why hadn't I thought of calling them? This is definitely weird, I thought. The Becks are a family that believes in constant communication. On my break, I hurried to my room. It would feel so good to talk to them, to tell them about the horrible murder, to assure them I was okay. And maybe they could clear up a few mysteries for me. Maybe they could clear up with the mystery of why I had arrived with a 2-year-old ID card, and maybe they could tell me something about Spencer Brown. I might have talked to them about Spencer after I went home last summer. Eagerly, I burst into my room, dropped onto the edge of my bed, and reached for the phone. I listened for a dial tone, then punched in my home number. It rang twice, then a pause. Then I heard a recorded woman's voice say, "We're sorry, but the number you have called is no longer in service." Chapter 21. Lindsay. I realized I must have dialed wrong, so I hung up and then punched in the number again, carefully pushing each number. 2 rings. 3. Then the same taped message. "We're sorry, but the number you have dialed is no longer in service." I listened to the tape repeat 3 times before I hung up. Then I slumped over on the edge of the bed, just staring at the phone, trying to figure out what I was doing wrong. My parents' number had to be in service. No way their phone would be turned off. No way. I had a sick feeling in the pit of my stomach. What was wrong? "Hey!" I cried out as a thought struck me. The storm. A brief thunderstorm had roared through yesterday afternoon. It lasted only an hour, but it could have messed up the phone lines. That happened a lot, and that explained why I couldn't get through to my parents. Feeling a little better, I picked up the phone again and called the operator. I'm having trouble getting through to my house, I told her. Could you dial it for me? What is the number, please? Her voice sounded tinny and far away. There was a lot of static on the line. I told her the number. I could hear clicks as she dialed it for me. It rang twice. Then the same Tate's message came on. I could feel the panic tightening my throat. This was so weird. Was I calling the wrong number? Had I forgotten my own phone number? I hung up and dialed long-distance information. My throat suddenly felt dry. My hand was shaking a little. Information for what city? Asked the male operator. For Shadyside, I told him. Could you tell me the number of Mr. and Mrs. Austin Beck on Fear Street? There was a long pause. Please find it. Please find it, I silently urged. It shouldn't be this hard to call home, I told myself, gripped with cold fear. I've never had any problem before. What is happening here? What? Suddenly, the operator's voice came back on the line. Could you spell that name, please? B-E-C-K, I said, practically shouting the letters. Beck, on Fear Street. He disappeared again. Another long silence. I pressed the receiver hard against my ear, listening to the low crackling sound. Finally, he came back on once again. I'm sorry, miss, he said. There's no listing in Shadyside for anyone named Beck.